Kicking off the list at number 10, we have Hope Summers. Making her first debut in X-Men Volume 2, Issue 205, Hope Summers is the first mutant born post-M-Day. She was born in Alaska and Cerebro just went off the charts. It went nuts. So the Purifiers immediately attacked. They were tipped off by a time-traveling Sentinel, Nimrod. So Cable came in at the same time and eventually saved her. But as for everybody else in that town, well, they didn't get so lucky. Cable saw the child as a messiah, the savior for mutants and humankind. But Bishop and the Purifiers were on a different page. They believed she would become a full-on supervillain. They thought the death toll would be 1 million after just 6 minutes. That's like, you can make rice in 6 minutes and then 1 million people are dead. That's bad news. That's bad news. And then after that, it would obviously only get worse, according to Bishop and his future knowledge. So the future clock was ticking. Hope learned how to fight by studying Cable, and the Strain 88 virus that recharged Rogue's power would kill anybody with just one touch. It was so much that Rogue fell into a coma. But when Hope was taken from Mystique, she was pressed against Rogue's face, and not only did she survive, but she also healed Rogue at the same time. Just like Jean Grey, Hope too was attracting the Phoenix Force, so when the Avengers came along offering to protect the child later on, that just led into Avengers vs. X-Men. So yeah, she's a little important, we can say that. Number 9, Brother Nathan. Brother, here we go. Making his first debut in Cable and Deadpool issue 16, Nathan Summers from Earth 58161 found peace. We'd love to see it. Now at this point, humans were done relying on television and all that crap. Instead, they used their imagination to explore and expand the humankind. How lovely is that? Wonderful. What a future. So our 616 Deadpool came along looking for the missing Cable, and that's where he ended up. He ended up here. Cable, or in this time, Brother Nathan that is, found Wade telekinetically and gave him the rundown. This pitch, this new peaceful environment that he created wasn't actually boring like Wade believed. And only 3 minutes later, Wade was gone. He got out of there. He couldn't do it. Only Cannonball and Siren from this Earth followed him back through dimensions, so he ended up getting in trouble by this quick visit. Brother Nathan is cool though. He's a cool dude. There's a ban on weapons in this timeline, but Nathan had this cool looking spear with a ceremonial blue tassel under the blade. It wasn't for combat, but more for keepsake purposes. And look at him. He looks like a nice dude. He kind of looks like the Lord, dare I say. Also, this world is beautiful. It feels like No Man's Sky meets Wakanda. That's a nice place to be. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be so great. It's so helpful here at the channel. You guys are the best. Now let's get right back into this awesome part 3. Let's do it. Number 8, White Sword. Among the many mutants residing on Okara, one was known simply as White Sword, or White Sword of the Ivory Spire, which rolls off the tongue a little nicer. He made his first appearance in X-Men Volume 5, Issue 12 during the 10 of Swords storyline. The White Sword and his army of 100 champions were sent to Ament. They battled and bought the mutants some time. So when the dust was settled, White Sword vanished. He never returned with his people again, and after the mutants were trapped in Ament, they saw all these demons who had been crucified, so they knew that the White Sword was there, just kicking all along. Now he was an ally to the mutants of Okara, but after that many years of endless war and resurrection, he eventually started to lose his mind, as one would. He would start attacking his friends as well as enemies. He just couldn't see the difference. I mean, as if living 1,000 years wasn't bad enough, imagine having to spend it constantly fighting for your life. But he is quite good at fighting. He's a master at sword combat, and if he does decide to heal you after a battle, you'll then be enlisted to his army by default. Nice. Number 7, Xorn. Jean Grey, this time from Earth 13729. This Jean first appeared in X-Men Battle of the Atom issue 1. Xorn, well rather Professor Xorn that is, was a teacher at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, and this is the past Jean grown up, right? That's important to say. Battle of the Atom was a crossover event where the future X-Men traveled back to the original 5, but they weren't exactly X-Men though. They were future Brotherhood of Mutant members, led by Charles Xavier II and Reyes, those two villain kids. So Jean Grey went by Xorn and rocked the skull helmet. It was a vibe, it was a pretty good look. The team wanted to force the OG back to the past and prevent their future. Now this version of Jean didn't have the Phoenix Force attached to her, but she was still able to take on Emma Frost. She was quite powerful. The dialogue alone is pretty great here. Jean is asking Jean what happens in the future. That makes her such a What a way to put it, right to the punch. Now this version of Jean can't go more than a few minutes without Xorn's containment helmet, and she has similar powers as our other Jean that we know, only they grow in strength this time around. It's trouble. Number 6, James Braddock Jr. First appearing in Captain Britain issue 9, Jamie Braddock Jr., the oldest son, of course, from Dr. James and Lady Elizabeth Braddock. And when I say oldest, he's 10 years older than his siblings, the twins Betsy and Brian Braddock. Now, Jamie can manipulate reality, but it never started that way. He was brilliant when it came to finances, and if that's to buy the books for you and not cool enough, he was also a pro race car driver. Nice. He found out about his brother's secret identity, and then he helped out here and there as a supporting character to his comic run. But Jamie started to get behind on bills, so he resorted to crime. First starting with minor crimes, and then as these debts grew, he had to get really dark and grimy with his actions. Eventually, Dr. Crocodile kidnapped him, told Brian about his brother's crime work, and his brother kind of just let him go, right? Doc Croc was evil. After these experiments, Jamie was convinced that this reality that he lives in is actually just a dream, and his mind was just breaking. It was sad stuff. This just happened to be the tipping point for Jamie to meet his mutant power, which also happened to be the ability to warp and restructure reality in his immediate vicinity. Terrible, powerful combo right there. Troublesome. He views the world as invisible strings that he plucks away at. It's like Interstellar style. Murph. Number 5. Archangel. Warren's wings are pretty amazing as is, but during the X-Force storyline, he got the upgrade of a lifetime. He got techno-organic wings by Apocalypse after he became the Horseman of Death. The old HOD. Sometimes they work. I thought he was powerful before, but this is just another level. His feathers were much stronger this time around as the Horseman, and he could fire them off like bullets. They could pierce right through steel, or he could use the wings to smash and fly through anything. Either or. The techno-organic wings regrew afterwards for a second time, along with the new blue skin tone to match Apocalypse. Now, this form of Angel is hard to keep away. He often struggles to keep his heroic side in control. If Apocalypse made me a Horseman of Death and I got all that extra power, I'd be pretty annoyed having it taken away every now and then. I get it. Number 4. Nathaniel Grey. This mutant is from an alternate reality, like some of our other ones that we talk about. He styles himself as a mutant shaman, loaded with precognition, telepathy, telekinesis. Who is he? Let's talk about him. Coming from Earth 295, artificially created from Sinister and the High Lord Apocalypse, Nate Grey is made of genetic materials from Cyclops and Jean Grey. He was created to be the ultimate telepath, and I think it kind of worked. He was made as a power bid to go against Apocalypse as well, and he's classified as an Omega level mutant, the most powerful psionic in any reality. Not just that one, and he's near omnipotent. So he's basically a living god. Neat. Just a fraction of power was enough to overload Omega and Mimic in Dark X-Men issue 2. Sentry and Nate Grey both fought Galactus in Dark X-Men issue 3, so it's fair to throw him on this list, I'd say. Number 3. Selene. AKA Black Priestess, Selene made her first debut in New Mutants issue 9. She was born 17,000 years ago, give or take, right after the Oceans, ate Atlantis. She was an enemy of the sorcerer Kulan Gath in Uncanny X-Men 191, and her powers are pretty spectacular and also terrifying. She can drain the life force out of you in order to live longer. All she has to do is come into physical contact and you're toast, mister. No fist bumping Selene in this house. Her tribe realized she was powerful right from the get-go, way back when humankind was just starting to evolve, really. So her tribe's elders all sacrificed their lives to make her more powerful and everlasting. That's a solid tribe, ride or die right there. They obviously chose die, but still, they're riding a little bit. The character Selene from the Underworld series, funny enough, was actually based off of this Selene from the comics, and I can totally see Kate Beckinsale now every time I see her, and so will you. Number 2, Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17, he was born nearly 5,000 years ago at the edge of the Valley of the Kings in ancient Egypt. He was born with gray skin and had blue lines all over his face. He looked different, so he was abandoned by his tribe. He was raised with the nomads with the idea that only the strong survive. So Apocalypse was killed by agents of Ozymandias, but was later revived thanks to his mutant abilities. Where to even begin with his Omega level mutant's abilities? I mean, self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form for starters. He's also a genius. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. All he has to do is drift into a gentle coma. Number 1 trick to getting your beauty sleep. A coma, that ought to do it. X-Men Age of Apocalypse from 1995, we see just how big and bad this guy can get. Oscar Isaac also had a swing at him in X-Men Apocalypse on the big screen, and I thought he was pretty scary, but when he gets big, it's just nightmare fuel. Check it out. And finally, number 1, Onslaught. Making his first debut in X-Men issue 15, Onslaught was a sentient psionic entity created by the minds of Charles Xavier and Magneto. What a combo! So when the X-Men were fighting the Acolytes, Wolverine hit Magneto, and then in turn, Magneto ripped the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, which I gotta say, I thought hangnails were bad. This sounds way worse. His healing factor had to work overtime, and Xavier was beyond upset, so he shut down Magneto's mind. He just made him completely catatonic. But during this moment, all of Magneto's lust for hate and violence leaked into Charles' consciousness, creating this new personality, Onslaught. Onslaught is pretty OP. He has the ability to tap into the psychic resources of the astral plane, where he can then manipulate matter and energy. Telepathy, telekinesis, electromagnetic manipulation, just a combo you don't want to face in any way.
Number 10, Moira X. We don't really know that much about Moira X in her mutant role yet, and she did just become human, sadly, in the comics. However, what we do know is that her resurrection powers that she had seem to be unparalleled because they imply that she has complete sort of multiversal control built into them. Or at least universal control. That is to say, it is heavily implied in Inferno that if Moira were to die in one of her lives, the universe she was a part of would possibly cease to exist. This prompts Mystique to defeat her by turning her human, then intending to kill her thereafter, now that she is no longer a threat. But of course, Mystique is unable to follow through due to the interference of other mutants on Krakoa, namely Cypher and the sentient mutant island of Krakoa itself. We haven't classified Moira X's power level yet as a mutant, but if she returns to being a mutant, and I kinda really hope she does because I really liked everything that we did with her as a mutant, I wouldn't be surprised if she was considered to be beyond Omega level just because of how intrinsically connected her powers are to the fabric of reality itself. It's quite unique and it's also quite powerful. Also, that's kind of why I want to see a return. I just feel like it was such a cool idea. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists where we talk about some super amazing powerful mutants, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. I don't know if we have 10 more Beyond Omegas, but maybe we could. Alternate realities. Number 9, Professor X. Professor X is typically classified as an alpha level mutant, so I'm sure you're wondering what made me so boldly include him here. So bold! 2 levels above where his Marvel fandom page has him classified as. I have some things that I disagree with though with that Marvel fandom page, to be honest. And honestly, I put him on this list because of some recent developments that I think were really cool and blew my mind. You can let me know if your mind was also blown by these or not. During the 2021 Inferno story, we saw Xavier and Magneto go up against Omega Sentinel and Nimrod after they were caught in a trap laid for them both by Mystique and Destiny. The two traditionally villainous ladies ended up kidnapping Moira, and while attempting to track her, believing her to have been taken by Orchis, instead, Magneto and Charles ended up fighting against that organization, or more specifically, their Sentinel creations. They ended up fighting more against those because Orchis was quickly, all the humans were gone. During this fight, Charles defeated, or at least very nearly defeated, Nimrod at one point by using his telepathy to, in essence, break them apart. And while this is crazy, what's even cooler is it was hinted that Xavier was capable of this level of psionic assault in the past, when the X-Men actually first fought against the Sentinels back in the Stan Lee and Jack Kirby days, when he concentrated intensely and he actually managed to use his power to temporarily kind of like put the Sentinels to sleep. To me, this was an amazing feat, and it was kind of a cool callback to that original fight against the Sentinels, and one that made me consider Xavier's potential for being an Omega level or even beyond Omega level mutant. I know there's gonna be some people that are gonna be like, hey, no, that was telekinesis, Amanda, and that's what's going on. But I don't think that Xavier actually has telekinesis. I know people say, no, Cassandra Nova, that genetic connection. I'm sorry, but I can't accept it. But if you accept it, that's fine. I just can't. So that's why I'm referring to it as telepathy, just so you know. I acknowledge that it is apparently a thing. Number 8, New Sun. New Sun is an alternate version of Gambit who actually first appeared in one of the Gambit series and is initially a more mysterious figure. He is what Gambit would have been like had he been created purely to be studied and utilized by the government. New Sun ended up escaping the Alpha 1 facility where he was raised and held though. This version of Gambit hails from the alternate reality of Earth 9921. Unlike Gambit, he does not have restrictions or mental blocks when it comes to his capabilities. He can also turn himself into energy and charge objects with kinetic energy without even needing to touch them. New Sun basically shows the potential that Gambit has for his power. However, in the 616 reality, there is an element of fear that Gambit harbors when it comes to his own powers and abilities that New Sun doesn't seem to possess. that New Sun doesn't seem to possess, which is what makes him so dangerous, but also what puts him way ahead of Gambit's mutant power levels. I wouldn't be surprised if New Sun was classified to hear that he had the potential to be beyond Omega. I've also just been a really big fan of the fact that like Gambit could be crazy powerful, he just like kind of chooses not to. I think that's cool. Number 7. Matthew Malloy. Matthew Malloy was said to be basically one of the strongest mutants in the entire world, in the entire multiverse even, or at least in his entire world, in his entire universe. Matthew Malloy hails from the reality of 14923, where his power was so great that he caused massive natural disasters by accident, just from feeling intense emotions. He had to be really careful with his powers in order to attempt to avoid such things from happening, but he wasn't very good at being very careful. Matthew Malloy's power set was reality warping based, but his power was so great that he ended up as more of a danger than an asset to the world and to other mutants. As a result, he was defeated by Tempest with some help from Professor Xavier. She defeated Matthew by going back in time to make sure his parents basically never met each other, so he could never be born. With him no longer existing, reality was changed and the one he had lived in blipped out of existence. Bye. Number 6. Marquis of Death. The Marquis of Death is a mutant who is well known for his ability to destroy. He could travel to alternate universes, traversing the multiverse, and was capable of destroying whole worlds within seconds, just with a thought. The Marquis of Death was not from the main continuity of Earth 616, but the alternate Earth of 807128, although there are other alternate versions of him in other universes besides. He's not the only one. This version of Clyde Wincham Jr. became obsessed with death after coming under attack by multiple villains and killing them in an instant with a single thought. He would end up being seemingly killed himself by Dr. Doom in the end, who worked with the Marquis under the guise of being his apprentice. That's the only reason why I ranked him so low. I know Doom is awesome, but I was just like, wow, defeated by Doom. That's how it goes sometimes, I guess. Number 5. Franklin Richards. Or at the very least, an alternate Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards of Earth 616 was recently stripped of his mutant status. No more mutant for him. And while I'm not convinced this will end up staying a permanent change to his character, I don't think it's been undone yet, as far as I know. I'm not up to date on my Fantastic Four though, so if I'm wrong, let me know, because I want Franklin to become a mutant again anyways. It turns out that Franklin had been using his power to alter his genetics to appear as a mutant. This was not intentional, but apparently was subconsciously done, and when his power started to go all wonky, eventually his unintentional genetic manipulation came to an end, which ended up with him being rejected from Krakoa, no longer able to visit there, because they basically found out you were never really a mutant, so bye. A future Franklin Richards of Earth 10774, however, seemed to have remained a mutant, either permanently one in this alt future, or simply not exposing that he had unintentionally faked his mutant genes. Not really sure which. It was the Mad Celestials in this future that identified him as beyond Omega level. Number 4. Miranda. While we never really got to know Miranda's codename or even really her full name, she was given her very own mutant class. That is how great her power was. Beast had to create a whole new classification just for her. She only appears in the Worst X-Men Ever limited series, which by the way is a really great read that I'd recommend you check out if you haven't already done so. Miranda here is shown to have reality warping powers, but ones that don't adversely affect space, time, the multiverse, anything in her reality, or the fabric of the continuum. Beast decided to give the new classification, which would sit above Omega, the name of Omicron, just because he thought it was the most ominous sounding letter of the Greek alphabet, which I gotta say, I love Hank's reasoning for that. So great. Classic Hank. I think my favorite thing is that although in this universe Miranda was beyond Omega level and could have fixed the world in like a snap, just with a thought, just with a pop. That's how her powers work. She does a thing and it's like pop. She understood why the balance of everything kinda had to be maintained and was very chill and content to just basically hang out instead of use her powers to fix or ruin the world, as so many reality warpers are prone to try and do, intentionally or unintentionally. And this is also a person that literally wouldn't ruin it, or like nothing bad would happen if she did it, which is pretty cool. Number 3. X-Man. X-Man is the genetic offspring of Jean Grey and Scott Summers, but hails from the alternate reality of Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295. Nathaniel Grey, being the product of Mr. Sinister, using the genes of Jean and Scott, is pretty much the epitome of what their perfect, all-powerful son could be like. Nate himself also seems to have a psionic connection to his alternate reality self, and kind of alternate reality brother Cable as well. At least I like to think of them as like alternate reality brothers. Nathaniel Grey is considered beyond Omega because of just the sheer level of power that he possesses. Like most others on this list we considered to be beyond Omega, he also holds the power to warp reality, but he can also do a lot more than that. Although I think if you can warp reality, that's pretty much just like saying you can really do like anything at all. Kind of like having all the superpowers in one superpower. So I won't even go into everything he can do, because basically if you're like, can he do that? Yes, he can do that. He can do everything. Number 2, Mad Jim Jaspers. Mad Jim Jaspers is a mutant that we don't talk about very often on our mutant lists. He's often a character that falls by the wayside because I suppose he's kinda niche. He hasn't been in like a ton of comics, but when it comes to what he's capable of, he definitely deserves our respect and deserves a spot on this list, I think. Of course, Mad Jim Jaspers is another reality warping mutant. So many Omega and beyond Omegas tend to be reality warpers, to be honest, which is interesting considering as an Omega even, you're supposed to be the top of the class in whatever your specific powers are. Of course, there are a lot of approaches and methods when it comes to how mutants can reality warp, which is, I suppose, what makes all those Omega and beyond reality warpers out there distinct and different. That's how we can have so many of them. While Mad Jim Jaspers hasn't been confirmed as beyond Omega level just based on what we know of him to be capable of, it seems super likely that he would be at that tier, were he to be categorized, were he to be given a classification and a level. An alternate Mad Jim Jaspers, who is believed to actually have been weaker than the main continuity version of this character, threatened the entire multiverse at one point with his power, so that just gives you an idea of what Mad Jim Jaspers could be capable of. Also, he should probably be in some more comics, I feel like. He's always a fun character too when he shows up in my mind. Number 1, Vulcan. Vulcan is Gabriel Summers, the youngest Summers brother who has had a really messed up childhood, slash kind of no childhood, complicated, and who happens to be the most powerful of all the Summers family kids. Scott has his optic blasts and Alex has his energy conversion, but Gabriel has what is possibly a limitless amount of energy manipulation and absorption. He can take in tons of raw energy and just hold it or channel it into something else, which is pretty crazy. Vulcan has been classified many times as beyond Omega level in the comics by various people, including Rachel Summers, and I think his niece herself would know a thing or two about power classifications that are off the charts, considering she is also an insanely powerful mutant in her own right. And she was also on my long list for even making it on this list, because I think she's beyond Omega too.
Number 10, Iceman. Bobby Drake made his first X-Men debut in X-Men issue 1. Now his powers are pretty obvious. I mean, even his name alone should tip you off. He can lower his external and internal body temperature because there are nerves that regulate body temperature and they're found in a part of the brain called the hypothalamus. See, Bobby can override this nerve drastically. His mutation allows him to withstand sub-zero temperatures and turn into ice within seconds. He can fully control ice, snow, probably snow cones, realistically. He can freeze the moisture in the air just like Frozone and create anything that he imagines. He can also create cold clones of himself on a molecular level, so you won't even see him coming, but you'll definitely feel it. Number 9, Elixir. Josh Foley made his comic book debut in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 5. Now he was detected by Cerebro, and his Omega power is actually quite helpful in this case. See, he obtains an Omega class healing ability, and around M-Day he was actually considered a general threat, weirdly enough. See, Elixir is able to control the biological structure of his and others' bodies. I mean, down to the genetic level. He can produce biomolecular energy whenever he chooses, affecting any matter that he chooses to come into contact with. So if he uses his powers too much, he'll pass out and just remain in a coma. It takes a toll on him. His DNA reboots itself, which is pretty impressive. I mean, I get a bruise and it hangs out for like an entire week. What's going on there? He was able to regrow Prodigy's heart in New X-Men Volume 2, Issue 39, and he cured X-23 of the legacy virus, and Josh himself says that he can cure Sabretooth from the inversion effect. What a combo. This guy can also bring people back from the dead. You can't really beat that. Number 8, Legion. David Haller made his comic debut in New Mutants issue 26. He was a child of Xavier and Gabrielle Haller, who later became the Israel ambassador to the United Kingdom. So the parents, I mean, there's a lot of pressure there already. See, he was kind of an accident. It happens. The pair had an affair decades back, but Charles was unaware that she was pregnant when he left her. Now the child was of course born a mutant with telepathic and telekinetic abilities, but he also had the ability to cause destruction with just his mind. The old Charles gene coming into play. Scott Summers describes David as Omega level, and the reason he's named Legion, well, it comes from the biblical demon Legion, where a man was possessed by many evil spirits, because David has 3 different personalities. All the powers with all the personalities. That's a scary, you don't want that. You don't want to run into him. Number 7, Kid Omega. I mean, yeah, Omega is literally in his name, so we have to include Kid Omega. Meet Quintavious Quire. He made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134. He's been described as one of the most powerful telepaths next to Jean Grey, who may or may not be on this list later on. I'll never tell. But he was once a host of the Phoenix Force as well. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang. He wasn't always a bad kid. It's just, you see what happened was on his birthday, when he was still young, he received a call from his parents to say that, oh, you're adopted. Happy birthday. Awesome. And these kids are the hardest gang in town. They handle humans the way that they want, with violence, cool haircuts, and monologues, of course. Now he's been described as Omega level telepath and telekinetic and scion. Not bad for a kid. Number 6, Vulcan. He named himself after the Roman god of fire, so you already know that we're But Vulcan's real identity was that of Gabriel Summers. See, he was born after Cyclops and after Havoc. Well, not really born, he was surgically removed from his mother's body and then placed in an incubator accelerator, aged to be at his prime, and then sent to Earth to work for Devon Shikari, so a little bit different than the other guys. He escaped and was found by Moira McTaggart with no memories of who he is or where he came from, which is always good. But as a student, he was impressing Charles a lot, and all he wanted to do really was learn his abilities so he can help others. You can't beat that, come on, the guy, he's got a good heart. Sounds like the dream student. Now he can psionically manipulate energy however he wants. He can manipulate other mutant powers, and that's the scary part with Vulcan. He suppresses all of your superpowers. Emma Frost, Rachel Grey, and Xavier have all confirmed that after the events of M-Day, this alpha level mutant absorbed energies from the depowered mutants and then became an Omega level 1 himself. Number 5, Storm. Aurora Monroe made her debut in Giant-Sized X-Men issue 1. She was recruited by Charles and joined the team to save other original students from Krakoa. Now, she was appointed leader after several years of hard work, and Storm has been referred to as a witch before because her powers to control the air and the elements, all that jazz. I mean, fair, she's kind of witch-like. Now, things go up a notch in X-Men issue 135 during the Dark Phoenix saga. Sebastian Shaw calls her a weather witch. Adds the word weather before, okay, it's a bit specific. See, it's not just storms in Earth that Aurora can control, even in space she can summon natural energy. Doesn't matter where you are, she'll find you. Number 4, Mr. M. Mr. M first appeared in District X issue 2. His powers came to be after an accident, like most of them. See, he accidentally turned a boy bullying his cousin inside out, and then he was stuck like that for 3 hours. That's the worst thing I can think of, I think. He didn't have lots of friends, I mean, obviously. The only ones close to him was Hannah Levy, who was not an Omega level mutant per se, but she did eat bugs. After M-Day, Mr. M himself was one of the few who kept his powers. Now those Omega level powers being, well, I mean, this guy can literally do it all. He can control machines, resurrect the dead, phase through objects, manipulate matter, telekinesis, telepathy, and much, much more. Number 3, Proteus. Kevin McTaggart is of course related to Moira McTaggart, as you could have guessed right then. Now he's the son of her and her husband Joseph. Now their marriage was awful. Joseph was a total piece of shit. He was abusive physically and mentally, so Moira got out of there. She didn't even tell Joseph that she was pregnant, and to be honest, that's probably for the best. Guy's the worst. So young Kevin and Moira lived together at her mutant research center off the coast of Scotland. Now Kevin, as he got older, manifested abilities, which basically was this uncontrollable need for power. See, he craved it, his body needed it, so Moira had to hide him. She kept him locked in a cell for years, only referred to as Mutant X, because she wanted to keep him safe, and also others, you know? So one day while Magneto was fighting the X-Men, his cell was damaged and he got out. Now since the isosteric energy in his cell was no longer holding him back, Kevin defeated Polaris, he defeated Multiple Man, and even escaped the Phoenix. He survived the Phoenix, that's crazy. Now his body was starting to burn out like Moira tried to prevent all this time. So the only solution here was that he had to possess another human host, and then another one after that, and so on and danforth. Now he renames himself Proteus, with his imagination being the only thing that limits his powers. He's made of psionic energy, and he too can warp reality. Every time he possesses a new host, he gets stronger and stronger until eventually the host burns out and then he has to possess another poor soul. What a horrible, vicious cycle. Number 2, Franklin Richards. I was the impossible boy who could dream the future. I was a god, born to be with the mutants, but also born into the Fantastic Four, which means I have twice as many enemies. Damn, you could say that again, Franklin. He was born in New York City. Franklin Richards is the son, of course, of Reed Richards and Sue Storm, and he is quoted from Galactus himself as the most powerful mutant ever. That is quite, put that on a resume, that sounds great. He's a mutant beyond Omega power, in fact. See, Franklin was a member of Gen X, and he's also a future X-Men member in the Ultimate X-Men comics. Now, some of his powers include vast reality warping, psionic powers, he has control over the universe, so that's cool, must be nice. Precognitive powers are also helpful, even when he's dreaming. His dreams will tip him off on the future and what's going to happen in them. Now, the only dreams I have are the ones where my teeth are falling out, or I can't run and my legs are made of rubber or something like that, you know? It's not as fun. He can resurrect the dead, he can time travel, he can teleport, astral project, and he can duplicate planets and or people. So if your eyebrows aren't raised yet, that's fine, I can continue. At a young age, he was able to create a pocket universe. And in Fantastic Four issue number 604, this kid took not only 1, but 3 Celestials. One of them, he laid them out with just 1 punch. So impressive. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. Of course, we have to end on Jean Grey. She is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in space with the Fantastic Four. It was drawn to her natural power. See, Xavier himself felt like he had to hide her true powers from her when she was just a child. He locked some of her abilities away in her mind. So the Phoenix Force was like, I smell something, what is that? What's hiding somewhere? So this dark cosmic force started to change her, and she didn't just get more powerful, she ended up becoming, well, low-key, she kind of became a villain. She ended up destroying an entire solar system that killed like, I don't know, billions of people, and then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was actually revealed that it wasn't the Jean Grey that had died, just the Phoenix as a separate entity, which is, that's better. That's definitely better. Number 10, Brian Morrison. You know, the drummer from that one band? I don't know, he sounds like a drummer. We'll start with a recent addition to Marvel Comics. Brian Morrison made his first debut in X-Men Gold Volume 2, issue 36. He was a pretty average kid until, you know, he wasn't all of a sudden. He entered this frantic state and then he was this living embodiment of power. He looked like he was made of lava almost. It was a scary situation. Buildings, roads, people, animals, all destroyed. Just do not get in his way. Now, Cerebro obviously caught this action, and then when the X-Men arrived, Kitty tried to reason with the new mutant, and it worked for a little bit. He calmed down, he went back to human mode, and then he was asked to come to Xavier Institute for Mutant Education and Outreach, you know, to sharpen up on these new intimidating powers. But an angry townsfolk was still heartbroken over the damage caused beforehand, and then put a bullet in his head. That was a soft-sounding gun. A bullet into his head. Now, at first, the doctors actually didn't want to operate. Because of his powers, they didn't want to administer any anesthesia, and then he'd go all god mode and destroy everyone. Fair. But luckily, Dr. Kozaneski agreed to perform surgery on the mutant. They changed their mind about how they felt about mutants. It was a nice moment. So not only did he survive, but he also joined the team right after that. We're off to a good start on this list, I'd say, yeah. Number 9, Exodus. Described as one of the most powerful mutants alive, Exodus is an Omega level telekinetic, and he can lift around 100 tons of weight, all telekinetically, like I just said. He was born in the 12th century and he made his first appearance in X Factor 92, and from birth, Bennett felt different. Like he had this power deep within him, something was there, but he wasn't quite sure what it was. Now at this time, he was an adult, he was a crusader who was best friends with the Black Knight of that era, Eobard Garrington. But then when he finally arrived to the Tower of Power all alone, he was exhausted. He had traveled far and wide to get there, and then when he arrived, he heard a voice, and it spoke to him, asking if he was willing to risk everything to become powerful. And he's like, yes. Whoever that is, yes, definitely, yes. Then his powers manifested. So now in X-Men Legacy, he brought Professor X back from the dead, and then in new X-Men Volume 2, issue 46, he regenerated damaged organs, which honestly, not bad for a guy who's now immortal as well. And before we continue on with this list, we want to ask you guys to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying it. I mean, if you're still with us now, odds are you're liking it enough, so just give it a little tap, and then we'll get right back into this list. Easy peasy. Number 8, Strife. Making his debut in New Mutants issue 87, Strife was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor. So he's a clone of Cable from the future, and he has this bad armor. He's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and unlike Cable, who has to devote his psionic powers to ensure this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, Strife doesn't need to worry about all that jazz. And obviously Apocalypse wanted this child. He wanted to raise the clone himself so that down the road he could one day claim the body as his own. Not a bad idea. Apocalypse named him Strife, and of course he had evil running through every lesson that he taught him. Number 7. Matthew Malloy. While some mutants seek out the hashtag Omega lifestyle, others just want an ordinary lifestyle. Not everybody wants superpowers, especially Matthew Malloy, that's for sure. I mean, his name alone, he doesn't have like a cool evil alias, he's just Matthew. Hey, it's Matthew. Old Eminem, Matthew Malloy. He appears for the first time in Uncanny X-Men Volume 3, Issue 23, and he doesn't last long. Spoilers, sad spoilers. But it's a good reason, kind of, not really. One day in Charleston, South Carolina, Matt and his wife Jules were having an argument. It was a little bit heated, and then all of a sudden she vaporized. Yeah, the Skrulls have great timing, I guess. And that of course traumatized him, and then a year later when he finally saw Jules' sister, his late wife's sister Alana, well, more bad stuff happened. He got so upset when he saw her and he started to remember all these things that his powers manifested, and he released this explosion of energy. Heartbroken energy. Alana's life was taken this time as well, so it's just getting worse and worse. His powers were uncontrollable. Multiple X-Men were biting the bullet after trying to stop this guy. So Tempest thought, you know what, let's just go back in time, and with the help of Professor X, also from the past, we can make sure Matthew's parents never meet and then never have him. Fair, good point. And the way Charles does it too is so casual. He's like, all right, ready? We're good. Let's go home. Number 6, Mastermind. Jason Wingard made his first appearance in X-Men issue 4. Now, he started off as a carnival mentalist, but was soon recruited into the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants from Magneto himself. He was needed for a very specific job. See, Jason, well rather Mastermind, was hired to use his illusionary powers to change Lorna Dane's memories so that she doesn't know that she's Magneto's daughter. Instead, she was made to believe that her parents had actually passed in a plane crash when she was just a wee child. Mastermind's power was also a necessity when it comes to taking over the country of Santo Marco. Mastermind was tasked to create an illusory army, and then he smiled as Magneto took over. He was like his little sidekick, little magician sidekick. He was like David Blaine, but like, you know, evil and a sidekick. Once Mastermind cast an illusion of Cyclops to surprise Magneto, great prank, awesome, but Magneto ended up using a magnetic blast back, and then Scarlet Witch was the only real one in the way. It's just a prank, dude, just a prank, relax. Number 5, Lactuca the Knower. Making their first appearance in Planet-Size X-Men yesterday, how lovely, Lactuca was a member of the Great Ring of Araco. Now their power could come in handy around the house. They simply know the location of everything, and yes, including that one shirt that you still can't find. Where is it? Maybe the cottage? Maybe it's at the cottage. They helped out Marvel Girl and Exodus actually when they had to move the entire island of Araco to Mars. Yeah, that's quite the move. All hands on deck. They're an Omega level mutant with extreme spatial awareness, but it's still unknown if that means the universe that they're in, or if that also includes the multiverse. We're still trying to figure that out in comics. Either way, there's room on this list for that new mutant. Number 4, Maddie, aka The Weapon. Good nickname. Maddie made her first debut in Deadpool vs. Old Man Logan, issue 1. She was a mutant who started to steal others' belongings in school. Now, she didn't mean to by any means, but they would just kind of teleport to her all of a sudden. Then one day when she was missing her father, he was working far away, she hadn't seen him in about a year, she accidentally teleported him to her. What a pleasant surprise. He was like mid-shovel too. Only thing was, this does a lot of damage to a human being, so they don't often survive this cosmic commute. So now she was detected by Cerebro, so Logan investigated what was going on. And that's when she ran into Wade, who also joined in on the fun. Now in actuality, Maddie wanted to be captured by Genform so that she herself could understand her powers more. But then when Genform abducted her and did experiments, she was then forced to teleport these massive vehicles and structures over Deadpool in order to crush him. Now the way Maddie helped him out was pretty cool, I gotta admit. She teleported Wolverine's claws into Wade's fists, and then he dug his way out. And yes, in case you were wondering, the claws were returned afterwards. Maddie took care of Genform's leader, Agent Hart, 2 months later herself. We love revenge. Nice. Number 3, Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious sounds like a Harry Potter spell. Decimus Furious made his first debut in Uncanny X-Force issue 1. He was born in Rome. Both of his parents sadly passed away when he was really young, so he had no choice but to live in the streets. So then around 281 AD, yeah, this was a little while ago, that's when his powers emerged. He started to attack people randomly until he was eventually locked up. He didn't really know what was going on. But it also didn't take long for his skills to be used in the Colosseum as a gladiator. He fought every day for his life for a few years, with freedom being that glorious prize that he's always chasing after. He was soon worshipped as the dark god Minotaur, so yeah, he was kind of killing it. He was picked as Apocalypse's final horseman, the horseman of war, of course, and he fought Deadpool, and then soon he fought the entire X-Force. This guy was a unit. He had war-filled psyche, so if you try and read his mind, it will backfire, and then you'll be overthrown with sorrow and hate. Plus, you don't want to get too close to this guy anyways, because one hit from his axe, and you'll soon have the cold thirst for war, just attacking people around you for no reason. Number 2, Iska. Iska the Unbeaten, there's a name for you. She made her first debut in X-Men Volume 5 issue 12 just last year, so also quite new. Iska was one of the many who lived on Okara. Now when her sister, Genesis, had 4 children, Iska forged the Scarab to celebrate, which was his epic sword divided into 4 parts. She gave it to her brother, Apocalypse, brother by marriage. Very important to say, brother by marriage, not blood brother. Now the Scarab was a symbol of the Genesis line of Okara, and when the mutants went to battle with the Amenthi Daemons, Iska betrayed her kind and then joined Annihilation's army. Traitor. I mean, well, her power is literally to not lose, so it made sense. Yeah, so she obtains what's called psychokinesis, so never play poker with her, because you'll lose. Because she can't lose. She literally can't lose. One-on-one, battles, dance-offs, you name it, she'll win them all. Probability is manipulated in her favor, and on top of that, she can also shapeshift if need be. Like when she joined Annihilation, her body was then covered in all these occult symbols. And then when she's aligned with the X-Men, her skin turns from red to gold. How neat. Number 1, Gabriel Shepard. Making his debut in X-Men Volume 3, issue 36, Gabriel Shepard was the last of the proto-mutants. That's when the X-gene was first evolved. So that was like 700 years ago, and luckily he was the most powerful and average looking, so he took on new identities, always moved about, he played it safe. He was blending in as a human, until the X-Men tracked him down to ask him about all these proto-mutants. But Gabriel's powers were already in play here. See, he read their minds, and then learned that the other proto-mutants had been resurrected to be used just as a weapon. But they didn't say any of that in the pitch. So he got upset and attacked. Then Pixie sent him to a timeout in Antarctica. And then after he cooled down, pun intended, he had a conversation with Pixie about the past and then decided to never let proto-mutants be used again, including himself. And then he turned himself into pure energy. What a way to go.
Number 10, Goblin Queen. I know, I'm actually hurting my own dark heart by putting the great Goblin Queen Madeline Pryor so low on this list, but there are a lot of powerful mutants out there. I'm sorry, Maddie. Madeline Pryor is the mutant clone of Jean Grey, who was created by Mr. Sinister, using a little piece of the Phoenix Force. I don't know how you even get that, but this is Mr. Sinister, so I guess there's nothing he can't get his hands on. He's all about collecting genetic material and I guess bits of fantastical things with which he can manufacture powerful mutants. Granted, for him, Maddie was meant to be simply a means to an end, helping him to get the genetic offspring of Madeline's and Scott's, aka Cyclops, whom Maddie did end up marrying. It turned out, however, that Sinister had bitten off more than he could chew with Maddie. Once she learned the truth of her origin, she went kind of insane, and her mutant powers began to manifest. Some don't believe Maddie to be as powerful as Jean, which is why she's ranked lower here, but technically, I believe that she would be at the same level, or at least close to Jean, making her also an Omega level mutant. Maddie also has the added power set of magic, which she has dabbled in before, and through said dabbling gained the title of Goblin Queen. Also, I gotta be honest, I'm mostly putting her at 10 because I know you all like the Goblin Queen with me. So she's a good intro point, even though, yeah, I agree, I think she should be higher up. I think I've put her close to number 1 before on one of these things, so just not her day. She already had her day in the spotlight. Number 9, Vulcan. I know some people might be disappointed that Vulcan is ranked so low on this list, but truly, it's really only because we have such powerhouses ahead of us, like I said. No powerhouse though. Sorry, Franklin. Apparently you don't get to be a mutant anymore. At least not for now. No more Krakoan weekend retreats for you. But anyways, back to Vulcan. Vulcan's power set is all about energy manipulation. Despite being the youngest Summers' brother, he also happens to be the most powerful. Where Cyclops is a good guy and Havoc is often a confused guy, Vulcan is often an evil guy, though he hasn't always been evil. It does seem that there is something villainous deeply embedded within him though that just comes out. It is unknown if there are even limits when it comes to how much energy Vulcan can manipulate, harness, and or absorb. Number 8. Exodus. Exodus is Bennett du Paris. Initially living in the 12th century, he ended up becoming an ally to Apocalypse, who also manipulated Exodus, making him likely more powerful than he would have ever been without said tampering. Exodus is considered to be immortal, and can also heal and resurrect others, and heal and regenerate parts of himself. He is also an immensely powerful psionic mutant. He can feed off the life force energy of others, is a powerful empath, telepath, and telekinetic. Not only that, but he is insanely durable, basically being impossible to kill or destroy, and can teleport. While we don't talk much about him, Bennett is pretty powerful and scary, hence why he has a seat on the Quiet Council of Krakoa. Here in that seat. Number 7. Legion. Legion is really powerful overall as a mutant, especially considering his power sets are pretty much endless. He is considered Omega level due to his power manifestation abilities for this reason. Legion is David Haller, the son of Professor Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller. David is often depicted as living with a severe dissociative identity disorder, having over 100 personalities residing within him, each with their own power set. Because of this, Legion is often considered a big wild card when it comes to his alignment. He is very chaotic, but more often has been considered a villain as opposed to a hero. Although right now, I would say he's more on the hero side, but of course, most mutants seem to be these days because Krakoa is a thing, so everyone gets to be a hero. Yay! Still, there are villains lurking in the shadows. Number 6. Tarn the Uncaring. Tarn is one of the Iraqi mutants who is kind of like the Arakko version of Mr. Sinister, except that Tarn is an Omega level mutant who also has magic based powers as well. Tarn's powers are mainly psionic in nature, granting him the ability to read minds while also causing pain to his target. Actually hurts when he reads your mind. Tarn is also a very strong telekinetic. Like Mr. Sinister, he is obsessed with evolution and genes, and is capable of altering the genetic makeup of other mutants. In fact, I think he does this with like magic. And I think it's actually part of his power set too, so it's not just a passion. The Locus Vile are what Tarn calls his loyal servants. These are Iraqi mutants that Tarn basically experimented on. While most don't survive his experimentation process, the ones who do have become loyal to him and basically see Tarn as their god. Tarn also has the ability to teleport, so yeah, he's just scary OP. He's just a person that I'm like, wow, I love that this is the Hellions, like one of their villains. And they're a mess, but it's like, here, take Tarn. He's crazy. He's crazy powerful. Good luck. Number 5. Magneto. Magneto is an extremely powerful mutant. He is known as the master of magnetism, and his power set allows him to control and manipulate anything that might be considered magnetic fields, and anything metal based usually. Guns are useless against him. He can disassemble them or crumple them with a mere thought, and can use his powers even to move giant mounds of rock by grabbing hold of the metals within them. He has used his powers in tandem with his daughter Polaris before to move an entire island, and he also used his powers to give Mars a jumpstart when the mutants were terraforming it in the planet-size X-Men issue from 2021. We see Magneto here grabbing all the iron needed for the project and bringing it to Mars, and using his powers to upstart the molten core, compressing it and bringing it to the required temperature. Number 4. Genesis. Genesis isn't exactly a villain just yet, but she was an antagonist during the Ten of Swords event, so based on what we've seen, I think we can kind of count her as one. Also, basically most of the Iraqi mutants can be considered more on the villainous side of things. They initially opposed Krakoa and also generally are a lot more deadly and violent in nature. They are a nation who is kind of all about war, or at least has been for centuries. Genesis herself was the ruler of Okara, ruling alongside her husband Apocalypse back when he was there with her, before he left and before Okara basically split into two separate islands, Krakoa and Arakko. Genesis remained on Arakko while Apocalypse headed to Earth, hoping to rally a new mutant society to bring back Arakko, which would help fight against the invading Amenthi demons. Genesis ended up becoming the new Annihilation, the leader of the Amenthi army, joining the demons with her own people, the Araki. Apocalypse fought against his wife in the Ten of Swords event and defeated her, freeing her from the possession of the Golden Helm of Annihilation. Genesis's mutant powers allow her to manipulate and control plant life. She is also an extremely strong and skilled fighter, and like Apocalypse and her sister Iska, has an extremely prolonged lifespan. Number 3. Apocalypse. Apocalypse is still one of the most powerful mutants out there. His Omega level power is that of evolution, meaning there is pretty much nothing that Apocalypse can't adapt to survive through. Over time, he gets more and more powerful as well, so the longer he lives, the more unstoppable in theory he will become. Apocalypse has proven just how much of a threat he can be, and all I'll say is I'm glad he's currently on the side of Krakoa, as he makes as powerful an ally as he does a powerful villain. Apocalypse not only has his mutant power set, but is also very experienced in magics as well. Fun fact. Also, Apocalypse may have never formally been acknowledged as an Omega level mutant, but I feel like we gotta count him because he totally seems Omega level, right? He's also come up against other Omega levels and bested them, so that's gotta count for something. Seriously, I couldn't find anything saying that he was Omega level, and I was like, how has this never come up before? How have we never classified Apocalypse as Omega? So whoever is watching this, if you're writing some X-Men comics right now, please do that. Jonathan Hickman, well, your time is coming to an end, but if you're still involved, please help us out. Pass it on to the X folks. Number 2, Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is another mutant from Arakko. So many of them are so powerful, Iska included. Iska's mutant power makes her pretty much undefeatable. She can never lose. That's her mutant power, yep. However, that also seems to mean if she is on the losing side of a battle, she is forced to flip sides, whether or not she truly wants to. Iska, I think, has one of the coolest mutant powers we've seen in a while. It's so creative, yet so simple and brilliant. Like other mutants who were meeting Iska for the first time, I was also obsessed with the idea of her power set. Iska being unable to lose means in theory she could beat almost anyone, or I suppose would have to refuse or evade fighting them somehow were she to potentially lose. Which is also an interesting element to her power set that I'd love to see explored more in the comics. In the Ten of Swords tournament, the first battle was between Betsy Braddock, aka Captain Britain, and Iska, and Betsy was quickly defeated. That is how powerful Iska is. Poor Betsy, strong as she might be, didn't seem to stand a chance. And I love how going into that battle she was like, I don't know how this is gonna go. Probably not great for me. Number 1, Monarch. I feel like we are always sleeping on Jamie Braddock somewhat on these lists and on this channel, so I thought it only appropriate that we make sure he's higher up this time around because he is really cool. Especially as Franklin Richards is no longer currently classified as a mutant in the comics. Franklin, aka Powerhouse, was considered to be one of the most powerful mutants around and was also known for his reality warping powers. Though both these characters have the ability to reality warp, each power set is basically based in a different type of reality warping. Like there's a different basis to it, if that makes sense. Monarch's powers work on a quantum level, and although there are people who can influence Monarch's powers by manipulating his mind, as we saw Jean do in Planet-Size X-Men, he also is pretty powerful as someone who can just make things happen and think things into existence basically, as we also saw in Planet-Size X-Men. When he was like, oh, you need a thing? Boom, done. Number 10, Storm. In Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 Issue 147, Storm finds herself turned into a living chrome statue by Dr. Doom. When her fellow X-Men arrive to release her, she is enraged from being trapped as a statue. Her fear of claustrophobia allows her to connect with her powers in a way she never has before. She rages and unleashes a storm that encapsulates the entire world as she becomes one with the planet and its elements. Fortunately, her fellow X-Men are able to talk her down, likening her to the Phoenix and reminding Storm of Jean's fate when she too was corrupted by power and turned to the dark side. That allows her to let go of all that rage and all that intense power that she is feeling and make her no longer a threat threat to the entirety of the Earth. This allows us to see from an early stage just how awesome Storm's powers were. Needless to say, when she was confirmed as Omega, those of us that had been with the X-Men since Volume 1, I'm sure, were gleeful at the news and unsurprised. Of course Storm is Omega, she's on goddess levels. Number 9. Vulcan. Vulcan is the other Summers brother. There's Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan. Gabriel Summers, however, is maybe the worst of the three, although both Alex and Scott have had their moments. Vulcan toiled to seize the Shi'ar Empire for himself after marrying Deathbird. When his father Corsair demanded that Vulcan stop his ruthless pursuit of power, Vulcan killed him, declaring himself emperor, and caused a great rift in the Shi'ar Empire, plunging it into a civil war. He was also just a generally awful brother to Havoc. Not cool. Number 8. Jamie Braddock. Jamie Braddock, also known as Monarch, was originally the cool non-powered older brother to Betsy and Brian Braddock. He was in charge of running the family business, Braddock Industries, and was really good at it. Unfortunately, that didn't last. His family was targeted by a villain, and afterwards Jamie began to get involved in gambling and criminal activity. As a result, he ended up being kidnapped by Dr. Crocodile, who sought to punish him for his wicked deeds. Jamie was driven insane, but this also caused his reality-altering powers to be triggered, leaving him crazy but quite powerful, and for a time obsessed with wearing Speedos. What is up with that? Is that what happens when you have your your reality-altering powers activated? My reality-altering powers are activated. I must wear a Speedo. He went on to attack the British superhero team Excalibur, brainwash children, and poison Black Widow, and always ends up being a problem brother who, when you think you can trust him, you actually can't, and who, when you think he's dead, he probably isn't. Number 7. Magneto. While Magneto may do what he does for what he believes is a just cause, there are still times when even he himself seems to be crossing his own lines. While Professor Xavier has often been an advocate for achieving peace and coexistence between mutants and humans, Magneto has seen the challenges between the two groups to mean that coexistence is really not possible. The way he sees things, it's mutants versus humankind. But even he took things too far when in Uncanny X-Men Volume 1 issue 500, after he had regained his powers, he used them to make Sentinels attack the X-Men. Sentinels! The very things that threaten the existence of all mutants. The nerve. Number 6. Jean Grey. Where to begin with Jean Grey? Being as powerful as she is opens up Jean to a lot of darkness, and when she ends up merging with the Phoenix Force, she ends up becoming corrupted by the power she manages to tap into, becoming, well, Dark Phoenix. As Dark Phoenix, she committed genocide, destroying the entirety of the Dabari race when she absorbed the power of their sun, causing it to supernova and destroying their planet and everyone on it. Beyond that, she also antagonized Emma Frost, telepathically torturing her. Sure, Emma Frost stole Scott Summers away, but I really don't think she deserved to be tortured for it. Besides, if there is anyone to blame in that scenario, it really should be Scott himself. You two ladies, just calm down. Number 5. Strife. Strife is a clone of Cable who was created in case Cable did not survive his technovirus illness. Strife himself has no such technovirus as a result, but ended up being kidnapped and raised by Apocalypse, causing him to become pretty villainous, which I guess is kind of like a virus in a sense. It's like a moral virus. He was the one responsible for unleashing the legacy virus on the world when he sent the canister it was contained in to Mr. Sinister, telling him that it contained important genetic materials belonging to the Summers line, and causing Mr. Sinister to open it, unleashing the legacy virus. While the legacy virus was stopped, it was considered one of the greatest threats to mutant kind. Beyond that, Strife also looks super cool. Too cool, in my opinion, for a villain, as it makes me want to be on his side of things. Stop seducing me to join the dark side with your stylish suit of armor, Strife. Number 4. Legion. David Haller is the son of Charles Xavier and Gabrielle Haller. As a child, he was scarred from witnessing a terrorist attack while in Beirut, and this caused him to develop a split personality disorder. Each personality that lives within him, and sometimes even without him, is fully independent and exhibits its own mutant ability, meaning that the access that Legion has appears to be almost limitless when it comes to all the different powers he can at times possess. It's not really his fault that he has a tendency to take things too far, as the damage he does is often caused by his mental disorder. When he is able to demonstrate control control over his powers, he can actually be quite helpful, even fighting alongside the X-Men and his father Professor X. That is when he's not being, well, kind of evil. But when he loses control, his abilities tend to manifest in unpredictable ways. He once blew up an entire facility after losing control of his powers. Number 3. Nate Grey. Nate Grey is the son of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth 295. He does not need a body to exist and has reformed himself from energy after his apparent death. Ergo, he doesn't need to eat, breathe, drink, or sleep either. He can also exist outside of all realities as well. He is known for being one of, if not the, most powerful psionists in the Marvel Universe. While he may not be as strong as he once was, you know, before he became a shaman and gained a better sense of discipline and control, he was drastically wild and overpowered. He had very little control over the insane level of telekinetic, telepathic, and matter manipulation powers that he possessed. He could cloak himself and others, making himself appear invisible. He once destroyed an entire moon with his telekinesis, and he has stated before that he was created to destroy worlds. That's just how dangerous and powerful Nate Grey can be. Number 2. Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards has created more than one universe, including a pocket universe that he used to save a bunch of heroes, including his parents, from villain Onslaught. By the way, it was in a little rubber ball. It's pretty cute. He has also resurrected Galactus, granted after discovering that the universe couldn't really continue to exist without that cosmic being, and he is powerful enough to kill Celestials. But despite all this power, Franklin has often been shown as using his power for good, not for bad. Still, the amount of power he has seems so ludicrous that I would argue he still needs to be stopped simply for this reason. Sure, we can trust him right now, but if someone could manipulate this currently young mutant, it could result in complete chaos and disaster. Let's not forget that this is a child who had to have his mind shut down by his father, Mr. Fantastic, at one point because it was just so dangerous. He got a dangerous mind, he's too powerful. As Galactus stated at the end of History of the Marvel Universe, Franklin Richards is the most powerful mutant ever born, which also makes him one of the most unstoppable and most dangerous. Number 1. Matthew Malloy. Who could possibly be more Omega and more potentially dangerous than Franklin Richards himself, who can manipulate reality? Well, another mutant who also has the ability to manipulate matter. Matthew Malloy. He accidentally killed Emma Frost using his abilities after she hit him and he just shouted "stop it," deleting her from existence. Malloy himself was kind of written out of existence, but before that he was known for creating the largest power signature on Cerebro ever. In fact, Professor Xavier was forced to put mental blocks on him just to stop him from accidentally wreaking havoc on the world with his limitless power. Matthew's power actually comes from another dimension, like Cyclops, which is why it also appears to be the inexhaustible kind. However, after Xavier's death, his power's mental barriers started to deteriorate, causing him to become very dangerous. Any surge of emotion can trigger his abilities. He once threatened to destroy the entire state of South Carolina with a potential energy blast, and his telepathic and telekinetic abilities are off the charts. So he would be one of those ones that went too far if he still existed.